Hi all. In addition to the wiki page on the offline user scenarios, we thought it would be a good idea to create a video to explain some of these concepts as well. So before I get started, just to recap, let's just remind ourselves of the basic registration flow as it stands. So let's assume we have our mobile and our web server. The simplest scenario assumes that in order to access this device, you need to have a user account, and that user must have been created for you on the web. So, in order for this to work, someone has to have come along and, using the admin interface on the web app, create a user for you in the database. On the mobile, when you come along and log in, the first thing we do is send your credentials across to the web. They're authenticated against the details on record, and then if successful, we'll log you in. What we also do at this point, so as part of this login, you need to actually specify which server you're connecting to. So there's a field on the login page where you enter the server URL you're connecting to. Once you're logged in, we actually record this URL against the user, and that will come in handy in a second. So once you're logged in, you can go ahead and register children. So all of these records will be put into a database. There is one database on this mobile for all users, which means, so I know at one point we did have multiple databases per user, multiple databases per device, one per user, but right now it's just one database for all users of the mobile. Now, when you hit synchronize, what we do is actually read this server URL you entered in and use that to determine which location we're synchronizing with. So when you hit synchronize, we'll load the children belonging to the user you're currently logged in as, get the server URL, and make a synchronization request, and send across those child records. What we're looking at now is an extension of this scenario to deal with unverified users. And now it's not always going to be the case that a user is going to exist for you in the web app. We are going to have scenarios where the mobile phone is going to be given out to a field worker and they're going to be told to go out and start registering children, and we want to actually have records of those children on the web server before we've had time to create a user for them. So in order to support this, we've extended the Android functionality to include a new, sorry, I have terrible handwriting, that says register or a sign-up page. Now this assumes absolutely no connection to any server. Once you're on this sign-up page, you can create a new user entirely on the mobile, so it only exists on your one device and nobody else knows about it. Also, this user is going to be flagged as unverified. And as part of this, we're introducing a second database onto the mobile. I'll just mark U and V. So on this second database, we are going to store all data for unverified users. And as we talk about later scenarios, I'll talk about how we migrate from unverified to verified. But for now, step one is I've come along, I've signed up and registered as a new unverified user, and I've logged in. Completely offline, not on any web server. The next step, so I can go along and register some children, and these are now going to exist in this second database, and I hit the synchronize button. Now the first thing you'll notice is, in order to synchronize, I need to know which location I'm synchronizing with. So what the mobile will do, it will first determine what type of user you are. So if you're a verified user, again, the flow will be just as I described. If you're an unverified user, it will call a separate piece of logic and it will bring up a separate screen asking you to enter the location of the server that you wish to synchronize with. So you enter that, the mobile will record that information, and then, as you're an unverified user, instead of simply making the sync request, the first thing the mobile will do is make a request to a new endpoint that we're going to create to register a new user on the web. Now this call will send across all of the user details that you used in registering on the mobile. The web will create a user, assuming this is the first time, so let's ignore any conflicts and so on. Assuming this user doesn't exist yet, the web will create you into this database and also mark you as unverified. At that point, obviously there'll be some parsing of the response that comes back from the web. The mobile will make a second call to sync the unverified records. And again, the web consumes this request and records these children in the database, but also marks them as unverified. So both the user and the records belonging to this user are all marked as unverified. And then in future, there'll be a separate story to deal with how we deal with that. So how do we view unverified users, how do we view unverified records and mark them as verified. But for now, in this scenario, they'll just be entered and left as unverified. And then same as before, the records will stay here and they'll be marked as now synced. The big difference here is that there's no pulling of data. So when a regular user syncs, you send records up and you also pull down records to the mobile. As an unverified user, you have no access to any children apart from the ones that you have registered. So this is an entire one-way sync. So you send information across, nothing comes back. And I think that is it. So that's the first simplest scenario. Okay, so let's now move on to scenario 2, which is an extension of what we've just seen. So it starts off similar. We assume we have our mobile and our web. Same as before, we have our two databases, and I have signed up as an unverified user. In addition to that, I've gone ahead and started registering some children, so some records exist in this unverified database. Now let's assume in the meantime, so I've signed up entirely offline, I exist only on the web, on the mobile, but in the meantime I've managed to speak to an admin and they've gone ahead and created a matching record for me on the web. And when I say matching, so again let's not get too carried away in the more complex scenarios, so let's assume I've signed up here with a username U and a password P. A matching means a user has been created on the web with the exact same username and password combination. Now, the flow to start with is going to be similar. When I hit synchronize, I'm going to first determine what kind of user I am. Obviously in this case I'm an unverified user, so step 2 is going to be to make this register request. At this point, the web is no longer simply just going to register me. The first thing it has to do is check if a user exists with the same username and password that I'm trying to register. If so, then the web will send some kind of response back indicating this to me. In addition to this, let's assume now, so in the simplest scenario, if a user has been created but for whatever reason is still unverified, then the flow will be exactly as before, right? I'll make the sync request and send my details across. However, let's assume that this user has been marked as verified. So this response that comes back from the web needs to say that a user exists and is verified. So that means the mobile logic changes slightly. After it makes this register request, it needs to take a look at the response that comes back and check if the user has been created as a verified or unverified user. If I'm verified, what I need to do is migrate all of my records from this unverified database across into the verified user database. So that just simply means loading up these records, deleting them from this database, opening a connection to this second database, and then saving those records. In addition to that, I need to now mark this user as a verified user. From that point on, the sync flow is going to revert back to making the exact same calls the code would make for a verified user. Because at this point, the user has been migrated, all of his data has been migrated, and so it should just be a regular sync. I send across my data, and I pull back data as well, and it should just hook in to the exact same services and tasks that already exist for verified users on the mobile. And hopefully that will be clear, and that's scenario 2.